Second unmanned lunar probe Chang'e-2 into space, with the launch taking place as the country held National Day celebrations. The satellite is aboard a Long March 3C rocket, which blasted off at around 7 p.m. The liftoff took place as scheduled, as weather conditions at the Xichang Satellite Launch Center in Sichuan Province were fine with good visibility. Chang'e will take its key techniques and collect data for China's planned attempt to land a probe onto the moon around 2013. Mona Lam has more on the country's latest space mission.
Chang'e-2 is expected to carry out a 6-month space mission. Scientists have been trying to improve their technology since China launched its first unmanned lunar probe, Chang'e-1, in 2007. And the highlight of the new satellite will be this 3D camera. It has a higher resolution than the one on the previous lunar probe, and its photographs, shown here on the right, are expected to be much clearer than those taken by Chang'e-1. Following the launch by the high-powered Long March 3C rocket, Chang'e-2 is expected to arrive at its lunar orbit in 5 days. That's only half the traveling time of Chang'e-1. One Hong Kong expert who took part in the previous lunar probe project believes Chang'e-2's task is to prepare for China's bid to land a probe on the moon around 2013.
Chang'e-2, I believe, is doing a lot of engineering experiments, trying to test out a number of techniques to make sure that things will go smoothly for Chang'e-3.
Chen believes the satellite will focus on Chang'e-3's landing area on the moon. Ming Lam, TVB News.
Well, Hong Kong's National Day fireworks display is set to begin in less than 90 minutes. Police are expecting at least 200,000 people to line both sides of the harbour to watch the show. Well, our reporter Kenneth Fong is
Western.
At least 4 people were arrested as police used pepper spray to break up the rally. Anne Choi reports.
Police took drastic action this afternoon, using pepper spray to control a large group of protesters outside Beijing's liaison office when the situation started getting out of hand. Led by radical lawmaker Leung Kwok-hong, members of the League of Social Democrats and other pro-democracy activists marched from Statue Square to the office in Weston. They were demanding the release of jailed mainland human rights campaigner Liu Xiaobo and condemning authoritarian rule on the mainland. But they were blocked by dozens of police officers waiting for them at the scene. Scuffles then broke out when the protesters tried to push their way through the police barriers. Several police officers were injured and sent to hospital. Meanwhile, another group of protesters on the other side of the office on Connaught Road West were trying to voice their demands. They were given the same police treatment as officers tried to get them to move away. Several protesters were arrested in today's demonstrations. The trouble lasted for more than 2 hours, and the protesters gradually dispersed after that. Anne Choi, HTV News.
China marked National Day with a solemn ceremony in Beijing, in which the country's leaders paid tribute to those who died building a modern nation.
The somber approach is seen as a reminder by China's leaders that this is more than just a holiday. Dan To reports.
Under smoggy skies in Beijing early this morning, the national flag was raised at Tiananmen Square to mark 61 years since the founding of the People's Republic of China. Thousands turned up for the occasion to watch the proceedings and to be a part of something to remember. In stark contrast to last year's joyous celebrations this day, when China put on a spectacular display of military and economic might to mark its 60th birthday, it was very different today. The event took on a somber mood as the central government put the focus on remembering those who died fighting for the country. President Hu Jintao, Premier Wen Jiabao and other senior leaders led a solemn ceremony to pay their respects at the monument to the people's heroes in the heart of Beijing. Veterans from the Second World War were also present to mark the occasion. Thousands of others turned up to pay their respects as well. Flower baskets were laid before the monument. China watchers interpreted the proceedings as a symbolic reminder by the country's leaders that people should not forget the roots of their prosperity and the sacrifices of those who made it possible, instead of getting too caught up in making money and getting ahead in life. State media reported the ceremony is seen as a move to advocate patriotism in a country that has become the second largest economy after 61 years of development. It quoted analysts as saying the ceremony reminded people that National Day is not only a holiday, considering that most people see this as a time when they can relax and enjoy themselves traveling or shopping. To tie in with National Day celebrations,
Secretary for Home Affairs Zhang Duxing said an extension has been made possible because the deadline to bid for the Games has been pushed back to next February. Timothy Falk, the president of Hong Kong's Olympic Committee, welcomed the decision, saying it would allow more time for the community to reach a consensus on whether or not to go ahead with the bid. But he once again urged the public to give the proposal some consideration, saying that it would leave behind a legacy for generations to come. But most political groups seem to disagree. Both the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong and the Democratic Party have voiced opposition towards hosting the Games. Today, members of both parties said they are unlikely to change that stance, even if the consultation period is extended, because they believe the money should be spent on addressing livelihood issues instead. Legislators from these parties account for almost half of the seats in the Legislative Council. So, unless they change their minds, it's unlikely that LegCo's Finance Committee would approve funding, even if Hong Kong is awarded the Games. 3 of the 4 Japanese Fujita Company employees detained last week in China's Hebei province have returned to Tokyo. Following their release yesterday, the 4th man remains in custody. The men were detained on September 20th for allegedly entering a restricted military zone and videotaping facilities there. According to the Xinhua news agency, the 3 were released after admitting to having violated Chinese law and showing regret for their mistake. A local Chinese employee of the company was also freed. Tokyo has renewed its demand for the immediate release of the 4th man. The detentions came amid a simmering row between Beijing and Tokyo, triggered by the arrest of a Chinese fishing boat captain near the disputed Diaoyu Islands on September 7th. China, meanwhile, issued a travel warning for Japan late yesterday after a Chinese tour group was attacked. The warning followed an incident in Fukuoka on Wednesday when a tour bus was attacked by Japanese right-wing activists.
A massive fire broke out today in a 38-story apartment and office building in South Korea's southern port city of Busan. No deaths were reported. At least 37 residents were evacuated and 3 taken to hospital. A firefighter was also injured. A fire official said flames quickly spread through the building's main stairwell, but were largely contained by this afternoon. However, a local television station reported that winds were whipping up new blazes. The fire official could not say how many people remained in the building, only that residents were still being rescued, some by helicopter from the building's roof. The fire started early this morning in a janitor's closet on the 4th floor. There's no word yet on the cause of the fire. Overseas, Ecuadorian army troops stormed a hospital in the capital, Quito, to rescue President Rafael Correa, who'd been trapped inside by renegade police in a protest over pay. The president later vowed to carry out a profound purge of the police after a day of unrest that left 2 people dead and more than 88 wounded. Ecuador awoke on Thursday to a country effectively without a police force. They were mounting a nationwide strike to protest pay and bonus cuts. As President Rafael Correa went to a police barracks to talk to officers about their strike, he was jostled and then attacked with tear gas. As disgruntled police took to the streets, burning tires and clashing with Correa supporters, the president was taken to a local police hospital where he was effectively held hostage. Major highways were blocked and police closed down the airport. As unrest swept through the city, Nothing was heard from the president for several hours, and rumors circulated that he'd been kidnapped and the country was facing a virtual coup d'etat. Police chiefs denied this, but civilian protesters trying to reach the hospital to free the president were also fired on with tear gas. Eventually able to speak to local radio stations from the hospital, the president remained defiant, saying he wouldn't negotiate under pressure and would leave the hospital as president or as a corpse. As night fell, the city faced the unprecedented situation of the army and police fighting each other in the streets. Around 9 p.m., the military stormed the hospital and released the president. Speaking later from the presidential palace, Correa said he'd been the victim of a conspiracy and called the protest an organized coup attempt. He also vowed to continue with his austerity policies.
The Eurozone debt crisis is back in the spotlight. Ireland announced another huge bailout for its troubled banking sector, sharply increasing the government's deficit. But the International Monetary Fund says it doesn't expect Dublin to need help from a $1 trillion rescue fund for indebted Eurozone countries. James LaGilia reports.
Ireland will have to pump $16 billion more into the country's crippled banking system, dealing further grief to shell-shocked Irish taxpayers. Coupled with the downgrade of Spain's bonds by a third ratings agency, the news from Dublin provides more evidence that Europe has not shed the debt troubles that shook the continent this spring, as Greece teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Irish government leaders described the total bill to fix their banks, about $68 billion as horrible but manageable. Among them, Allied Irish Bank, once the country's largest financial institution, but now so weakened by loan write-offs it cannot borrow on international markets. The bailout will swell Ireland's deficit this year to a staggering 32% of economic output, the biggest in post-World War II Europe. That's more than 10 times the European Union's 3% cap, and by far the worst in the Union. Yet investors seem to find some solace in the view that Ireland at least had come clean about the worst of its troubles. Irish government bonds and the Irish Stock Exchange rose, while European Union officials expressed confidence in what Ireland had done. Investors also took solace from the fact that the Irish government canceled all bond auctions for the rest of the year, highlighting the fact that a growing but well-structured debt portfolio means there is no impending liquidity crisis. But some analysts see the cancellation by Finance Minister Brian Lenihan as just a stay of execution, unless he can come up with a credible 4-year plan in November to get the budget back under control by 2014. James LaGilia, TVB News.
And still ahead in the news. Top leaders attend a National Day ceremony in Tiananmen Square. Recall of 15,000 Mattel products sold in Hong Kong. And a world record for the largest fashion show.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock.
That familiar sound of everlasting joy.
另外一批市民就響應工會號召，抗議樓價急升，影響民生。
最緊要而家啲後生冇屋住，啊！ 搞到嚟我咧要翻大陸住，打份工啊！我咧就有幾個人都冇辦法供個樓，就係二手樓都冇辦法。
遊行人士原先申請向前行經新馬路去政府總部請願，不過警方喺現場喺度架設鐵馬，通知佢哋要改行另一條路前進。兩批示威者最後都係根據警方安排嘅路線，遊行到政府總部遞交請願信之後離開。 有線電視記者譚家恒喺澳門報導。
一個15歲嘅少年喺長洲遇溺昏迷。消息話，啱啱5點幾，個少年同朋友喺長洲東灣游水，期間失蹤。朋友通知救生員同報警。大約20分鐘，個少年被發現喺水裡面，救起嘅時候已經昏迷，送咗去長洲醫院治理。東區醫院兒科病房發生懷疑非禮案，警方拉咗一個男人。 醫管局話事件發生喺東區醫院兒童及青少年病房，18歲以下嘅病人不分男女都會安排入住呢一個病房。消息話疑犯係呢一個病房嘅一個13歲男病童， 涉嫌性侵犯病房內一個5歲女童。警方話拉咗一個男人，涉嫌同案件有關，暫時列作懷疑非禮案，交由東區重案組跟進。醫管局話相信今次係個別嘅事件，又話會檢討兒科病房嘅運作。
一個西醫因為冇同病人做詳細嘅檢查，就處方有潛在危險嘅藥物，被醫委會裁定專業失德，停牌1個月，緩刑1年。西醫楊成喺出席醫委會紀律聆訊，佢被指喺07年8月嘅時候冇為一個38歲嘅男病人做詳細檢查，就向佢處方俗稱薄血丸嘅通血管藥物，亦都冇説明藥名同埋副作用。病人喺服用之後持續肚痛，到私家醫院檢驗，先至知道食咗薄血丸。兒童用品品牌費雪展開大規模回收，喺美國同埋加拿大回收大約1100萬件嬰幼兒用品，包括係餐椅同埋嬰兒玩具組合，部分喺中國製造。徐琪輝報導。
要回收嘅 BB 玩具組合包括 Ocean Wonders 同 Bat and Squall Go 系列，部分喺中國製造。美加當局收到超過50宗報告，指吹氣膠波上嘅活栓會跌落嚟，可能令 BB 逐親。另外，仲有3款喺01至10年出售嘅 BB 高凳要回收，包括呢款中國製嘅 Healthy Care 系列。當局話燈架突出嘅鐵釘原本係用嚟摺疊收藏，但美加收到14宗報告，指呢啲鐵釘令 BB 割傷，當中有7個要聯針。美加仲回收超過700萬架唔同款嘅 BB 三輪車，啲三輪車喺97年開始就有得賣。如果 BB 坐上去或者跌親，車上突出嘅塑膠鎖匙位可能會揞親 BB 或者傷及下體。最少10個人因此受傷，其中6個2至3歲嘅女仔情況比較嚴重。至於呢款今年先有得賣嘅玩具，當中2架玩具車仔嘅轆可能會甩出嚟。廢雪方面會為今次要回收嘅產品免費提供更換嘅零件，而出問題嘅玩具車仔就會全部換過新㗎。有線電視記者徐琪輝報導。
廢雪牌香港代理話，要回收嘅產品有9款曾經喺香港發售，顧客有問題可以打熱線查詢，電話係25561112，公司會將改良咗嘅組件寄俾顧客自行更換。國家旅遊局發出赴日本旅遊安全提示，前日有中國遊客坐嘅旅遊巴喺福岡被右翼分子騷擾。國家旅遊局跟住發出安全提示，提醒喺日本或者計劃去日本嘅遊客同旅行團注意安全。中日發生撞船事件之後，中國駐長崎同埋福岡總領館分別俾人擲照明彈同埋煙花，當地亦都有華僑學校收到恐嚇。
世界盃乒乓球團體賽啦，中國擊敗咗新加坡，贏出女團啊！
冇錯，唔錯嘅國慶日禮物嚟㗎。更加令球迷雀躍嘅咧係國藥打返出水準啊！
黃衫嘅國家隊由國藥打頭陣，對住黃月古呢位22歲嘅世界冠軍，近期跌入低潮期，開頭都谷唔起㗎，俾人打到離台，一下變線搞掂埋，一度落後2-6。被批評表現飄忽，難成領軍人物，甚至想打亞運都難，係時候發力啦！呢局最終反勝11-8。國慶日，中國球迷營造主場氣勢，加油啊國藥！第2局佢真係再加油㗎，起板更爽，落點更準，再贏11-7。第3局互有領先，雙持球國藥唔怕你，贏埋11-9，爭口氣幫國家隊先攞1分。中國喺今年世錦賽女團決賽曾經輸過俾新加坡，之後國艷落後1局下反勝馮天妮3-1。加上國藥同李曉霞雙打，直落3局擊敗李佳薇、黃月古，中國隊大分3-0擊敗新加坡，奪得冠軍。